Hello gang, Tony Torres here with Defense Lab Tactical, Defense Lab TNT in Arlington, Texas, and Edge Protection Systems. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about self-defense, not in general self-defense, but we're going to start breaking it down from what most people think self-defense is and how you should be training self-defense in general. The first thing I want to talk about is that term self-defense. To me, self-defense is mostly a legal term that you would use in a trial or something like that, that you acted in self-defense. It's not so much what people would consider self-defense techniques. Two other phrases that are used to describe what most people call self-defense. The first one is what some people like to use, self-preservation. And that's accurate because to preserve something, that means you want to maintain it in its original state. If you're a healthy, normal, happy individual, you want to preserve yourself, you want to maintain that lifestyle, etc. So self-preservation is a term that encompasses a lot of things, and some people use it when they're speaking about what I like to call, and the terminology I like to use, which is self-protection. Now, the reason I like the word self-protection better than self-defense or self-preservation, again, self-defense being mostly a legal term, self-preservation, although it's somewhat accurate, the word preservation is a little too passive for me. I believe in being proactive, and the word protection, the root of the word protection is two words. The first one is pro, which means the front or at the beginning, and the second word, tegere, the second root word, the protect part is from the Latin word tegere, which means to cover. So technically the word comes from the Latin to cover something from the front. And to me that always was more valuable because it means that you're taking a proactive approach to your self-defense, or in what I like to call self-protection. So let's look at those proactive things that you can do, or those things that would happen before you and a bad guy or a bad person or a criminal of some sort collide with each other. So the first thing is you want to be able to what I call the relaxed attitude, or participate in a relaxed attitude. That means you want to be around the people, places, and things that bring you joy into your life. And luckily for us, living here in the Western civilization, in this great country that is the United States, violence will not normally be visited upon us on a regular basis. So we live in a fairly safe society where we don't constantly have to worry about being attacked unless you live in very specific areas of the United States. But in general, the great majority of the population in the United States lives in a safe area where having to protect your life or protect your property or protect yourself from injury is not something that's daily, that happens daily, unless you have a specific job or you live in very specific areas. Because we have that fortune, the good fortune of living in a very safe place, then we can be a little bit more relaxed. And I know that there's some people out there that are into realistic self-defense that are going, well, no, there's no time to relax. You must always be looking for, danger at every corner. And actually that's counterproductive. If you're constantly looking for danger, it's like, hey, what's going to happen if I walk over here, etc. If you have that awareness of the prey, where you're always, it's almost like a state of paranoia, that actually will shut down the signals that you really need to pick up on in order to perceive real danger. So what I like to tell people is you want to have the alertness of a predator rather than the awareness of prey. And that brings us to the second point, which is I prefer the word alertness rather than awareness. So let's look at that. The more relaxed you are, the more you are able to pick up on things that are off in your environment. And that's very important. When you're looking at, how do I pick up, a potential attack or a potential bad situation, is through the alertness model, which means you are actively engaging your environment to get information, and you are prepared to respond to that information. Whether it's danger or an emergency, it doesn't necessarily have to be an attack. It might be, oh wait, that car is about to, the wheels are turning the wrong way, he's getting ready to, hit near here, I need to move myself out of there. So it doesn't always have to be about being attacked or specific violence perpetrated by another human. It can also be just being able to respond to an emergency. Hey, that person's looking a little disoriented. Their eyes are rolling to the back of the head. I think they're going to fall down. They're passing out. We might have a heart attack or something like that. So you want to be able to respond to an emergency or, of course, danger. That's the state of alertness, and that's very important in self-protection. If you are prepared to respond, then that's a lot better than just being aware of things happening around you. The way to be able to do that is to maintain a certain level of relaxation in your life. The more relaxed you are, the better off and the better you will be at picking up real signals of danger rather than imagined signals of danger or false signals of danger. How people are training self-protection. There are different ways to do this. The most common one that you will see in either martial arts schools and in some combat sports schools that say that they teach self-defense, you will find that there's a paradigm or a methodology where they'll teach a series of self-defense techniques. It's very common in Gracie Jiu-jitsu. They'll have self-defense, again, it's a choke from the front, a choke from the rear, and Krav Maga has, self-defense against, the same. What I like to tell people when they practice, the first thing is I prefer the terminology tactics, self-defense tactics, rather than techniques. Techniques implies that you must follow each step in sequence, and if you don't do all these steps in the correct sequence, then you're failing. The problem with that is that there's a bad guy involved in there that will be resisting your attempts at thwarting his attack. A lot of times when that bad guy is resisting his attempts, then your technique is not going to go in sequence. So if you're obsessed with following the technique, A must follow B must follow C, it'll actually create a downward performance spiral in your brain when all of a sudden you're failing or your technique is failing. Rather, I like to use the word tactics. Tactics is the efficient use of movement. So when you're using movement efficiently, there's room for adjusting as things aren't working right. And that can only be developed by training with with somebody actually resisting you actively. However, let's go back to self-defense techniques. What I like to tell people when they're practicing a self-defense technique, let's say a release or an escape from a choke from the front, is that the self-defense technique is actually the beginning of the fight. First of all, a lot of these self-defense techniques are actually what we would call in Defense Lab Tactical and Edge Protection Systems, we actually call them late responses. So for example, if somebody's reaching at your throat to grab you by the neck to slam you into a wall, a proactive response would be to somehow deflect the hand out of the way and attack or counterattack immediately. So the hand never gets to your throat. A counteractive response would be as the hand is coming, I'm trying to attack the person. A late response or a reactive response is the hand gets to your throat, and now we have to deal with that. So a lot of these self-defense techniques that most people practice are actually late response alternatives to something that can be dealt with a lot faster and a lot more efficiently if we are alert and see those things coming. However, that doesn't mean that that kind of practice is not useful. It's actually very useful to practice late responses, because late responses are the worst case scenario. Somebody actually grabs you in a bear hug and now they're trying to pick you up to dump you. Somebody has locked a choke from behind you and they're dragging you backwards while their arm is around your throat and you're starting to get dizzy. It's very valuable to train that way, because that is the hardest thing to deal with. The hardest thing to deal with is a late response. If you get really good at dealing with late responses while still maintaining a good strategy of, if something's happening for real, I want to have an early response or a proactive response. But if you get really good at dealing with those late responses where that choke is almost all the way in and now you have to get out of there, then anything that's less than that is actually easier to deal with. So it's the duality of the balance here. You want to make sure that you're getting good at those late responses while still having a strategy and the alertness to respond to things as quickly as possible before they turn into a late response. The next thing we want to look at in all of this pictures of self-protection is that we must incorporate a partner that is actually resisting your efforts. Now, you don't want to get hurt or injured in the process of practicing self-protection, because then that would be counterproductive. If I'm trying to practice something that's supposed to maintain my health and my life, but in the process of doing that, I tear my ACL in my knee, then that literally defeats the purpose, because now I am a worse fighter with a torn ACL than I was before. So if my self-defense training is actually injuring me, there's a problem. Now, experiencing some pain and some discomfort and some light, bleeding or small level injuries like fat lips, a little bit of a bloody nose, etc., that is not an injury that will make you less efficient at protecting yourself. So if it's just a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort, a minor scratch or a bruise, that's perfectly fine. And as a matter of fact, if you're not experiencing that, then probably your training is not, there's not enough resistance there. However, when the resistance gets to the point where you're getting injured, then that's when you're being inefficient. Lastly, the most important thing that I want to leave with you guys for this week's video is this. Self-protection is about being ahead of the curve mentally and physically. The better shape you are in, the better you will be able to protect yourself. The more training you have, the better you will be able to protect yourself. So when you're training, you want to look at it holistically. You have to understand what it's like to defend yourself from incoming blows, striking, and you want to learn how to apply those yourself in self-defense. You want to understand how ranges compress and you may end up in a clinch situation. You want to understand how you might end up on the ground, but always do this proactively. Thinking about self-defense or self-protection as just learning a bunch of moves is not enough. You have to have the awareness or the alertness of somebody that's informed. The more informed you are, the more your alertness can be a relaxed state rather than a paranoid state. If there is tension or paranoia, you are more likely to miss what can actually hurt you. So you want to have that balance of having the alertness, the relaxed alertness of somebody that understands the environment that they're in. train hard. Please contact me with any questions or any comments at 520-236-2436. Defense Lab Tactical, Edge Protection Systems, and Defense Lab TNT. See you next time. Bye.